handling food shortages, what I learned living in the USSR. Hi, it's Natasha Bailey from Soul Mission here. So today's video is how to handle food shortages and what I learned from living in the USSR, from living in the Soviet Union. So when I was a little girl in the 70s and 80s, I used to live in my Russian grandmother's flat every summer for 3 months for 15 years, up into my kind of early to mid-teens. And we experienced food shortages on a daily basis. Often my parents and I, we would go into the shops and most of the shelves would be empty. So we, as a family, we came up with some really excellent strategies for handling this situation. So first of all, there would be a lot of queues. And I remember one time we queued for 2.5 hours to get into a particular restaurant to eat something, or even a couple of hours queuing for food. So the first thing that we learned is that we learned how to manage our own emotions. So we wouldn't get bored or frustrated standing and waiting in the queue. So we got into the habit of bringing a book with us to read while we waited. So that was our way of handling our boredom and frustration. And this really allowed me to develop patience with things and just trusting that I will get to the end of the queue in divine timing. So that was the first thing that we developed. We managed our own emotions. The second thing that we did was we seized opportunities when we saw them. So for example, we would see a queue, we would join it because we knew that something at the end of the queue would be really, really worth it. And we'd ask later, what are you selling? You know, and we'd ask the message down the queue, what's selling? And the message would come back, we're selling oranges. So this showed that we were flexible and adaptable to the situation, and we could see an opportunity when we saw one. So this is very important to adopt now, flexibility and the ability to see opportunities when they arise. The next thing that we did as a family was we cooperated with other friends, family and neighbors. So once we got to the end of the queue that sold oranges, we wouldn't buy a kilo, we might buy a couple of kilos, but, and this is a big but, if you are going to buy a lot of food, please do what we did when we were living in the Soviet Union. Go home and barter, do an exchange with your friends, your families, your neighbors. And that's what we did. We bartered some of our oranges for some of their tomatoes, or some of their bread, or some of their cheese, whatever people were able to exchange. So please, for everybody who has been out hoarding there, please be generous and cooperative with the people around you and exchange. You never know what it is that you might need from someone in this time staying at home. So I'm not advocating bulk buying, but I am advocating cooperation and potentially bartering. So the final thing that we developed as a family was my parents got very creative and very entrepreneurial. So what my parents would do is they would buy cheap secondhand English-speaking books from flea markets in our home country. We were living in Denmark. I was living in Denmark. And they would buy it for the equivalent of 10p, shall we say. And they'd fill up these giant boxes with secondhand books by Agatha Christie, which was super popular. And when we got to Moscow, which is where we were living during the summer, my parents would take these secondhand books to secondhand language bookshops, where the bookshops would buy these books off my parents for, 10, sometimes 100 times the equivalent value that my parents bought them back in Denmark. And in this way, my parents made money for us to live and survive throughout the summer. So we kept it rolling. My parents were hustlers. Amazing. So what I'm suggesting to you is get creative. How can you be entrepreneurial in this day and age? What can you offer someone in exchange and receive something in return that everyone could find some use in? Okay, so just to summarize, how to handle food shortages, what I learned from living in the USSR, handle your emotional management in long queues, bring a book or something to distract yourself with, seize opportunities when you see them. If you see a queue, join it and ask what's for sale. Secondly, and thirdly rather, cooperation or bartering with friends, family and neighbors. And finally, be creative, be entrepreneurial. There are gifts that you have that you can offer people in exchange for something else. So I hope you found this video useful. I am sending you much, much love. Goodbye, brothers and sisters. Mwah.